within the documents that have been sent to the FTC in regards to the Activision Blizzard buyout was this little nugget that started making headlines and started getting people excited on Twitter, is that basically the new consoles are not coming till at the earliest 2028. Now, to keep this in perspective, the new console, the current console generation now, which is PS5, Xbox Series X and S, has been out for 2 years at this point, which means it's going to be an 8-year console cycle, according to what this report has said. Zero, what are your thoughts on the revelation that new consoles are supposedly not coming until 2028?
It's interesting, but I've already seen the usual new console shit posting from the internet at large, with people going, "OMGs, is this going to be the moment that we see 8K gaming? Oh man, I'm gonna have to go out of my way and buy an 8K TV now," and stuff like that. And I just see the speculation going, yeah, who knows what could happen between now and 2028? Just within 6 years, who knows? Just 8K may no longer be the in thing. For all we know, it could be 12K. Just there's really just no telling on how the future of gaming will move on. And I think really the bigger curiosity is going to be, will we see the full-on digital revolution in the video game purchasing space? Because I know a lot of people weren't happy with the Xbox One's original purchasing scheme, which was each disc had a DRM locked key and all this other junk. So, I mean, do future video game consoles end up going down the same road that Steam and PC gaming as a whole has gone down, with just completely digital purchases with no potential way of archiving your purchases? I think those are going to be the more interesting questions. But yeah, just kind of funny to see the usual tech spec musings of just people all over when they saw this news that new consoles won't be arriving until about 2028.
I thought this was an interesting little factoid that they found on this, only because we are now we're 2 years, and we're going to be on the 3rd year starting now when it comes to these new consoles. And I got to be absolutely honest with you, I don't feel like we've had a next-gen game. I've not thought of a game where I would say, wow, and this couldn't have been done without this console. I have not thought that once throughout this entire time. Sure, you have some games that have better frame rates or look a little bit better, but I have not seen a game that looks great and plays great that also isn't on a PS4 or an Xbox One. So we haven't hit the point where we even feel like we're getting like new games essentially that harness the power of these consoles. I mean, I guess one exception is the Ratchet and Clank game Rift Apart, but that was kind of tech demo-y at least. I don't know. I guess that kind of counts at that point. But even then, like, we're 2 years in, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks this. I've been, honestly, I thought about this this past week. Honestly, I was thinking about this week, and I look at the consoles that I have and go, I could have waited. Like, that's the thing that just dawned on me. I was like, I was all gung-ho to, like, I want to get the new consoles because, you know, games will look better, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, they're not markedly better. They're not, like, there's not, like, a big jump, I think. And I just haven't seen a game in these new console cycles that really makes me think that they are really utilizing this hardware. Now, if they're saying in 6 years they're going to now do it all over again, to me, this might be an almost wasted generation. Where almost half the generation, or a third of the generation, is spent just trying to a ping pong between the last and this, I mean, that's pretty bad. I would think 2030 would probably be a good year, because if it turns, and unfortunately the gaming community has doesn't really have a long track record, or not a long track record, but they don't think past a year or two, because they'll start saying, "Oh, 2026, the hardware needs to get better." Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, not really. It does not, because we're still making game. Like, here's the thing that dawned on me after listening to a podcast this couple days, is that a lot of the new games that are coming out now, if you put them on PC, still only require a 960 or a 1050 in order to run. What does that tell you right there? Like, we're not getting new gen stuff. We're just getting maybe, like, you're getting like some games that run a little bit better or a little bit prettier, maybe, but you can still run them on an Xbox One, essentially. And because you can still run them on Xbox One and PS4, they're coming out on those systems. So to me, we haven't had a next gen game that really, I would say, defines this generation. And usually we have at least 2 or 3 at this point.
I know I've seen some people, as far as like the 9th gen stuff goes, some people have tried to float the idea that Elden Ring is the game of the generation, but it really doesn't count, because it also came out on 8th gen consoles too. So that's one of the reasons that, in my mind, I would disqualify that mention completely, because it's not truly a 9th generation game. It's still a hybrid generation game between 8th and 9th.
And it's not a borked version either. I've not heard anybody complain that, oh, this one is screwed. Like, this is not a good port. Like, I don't hear that happening either. I'm not hearing like PS4 players and Xbox One players, except with like specific games, them saying, oh, don't get this version because it's absolute crap. Like, I remember Shadow of Mordor. Remember when Shadow of Mordor came out? And it was on Xbox One, PS4, and they also did versions of it on PS3 and Xbox 360. I think people have forgotten about this, but those versions were so gimped that I think the Xbox One and PS4 versions got like 9s and 10s, and the other versions were like 4s and 5s. Like, they were abysmal. Like, the game did not run well, and I think the Nemesis system was completely stripped out of it.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
The 7th gen versions had the Nemesis feature completely just deleted out.
Right.
So, which I know for some people, it just kind of floored them. It's just like, oh my god, that feature just got deleted out? Why? And it's just like, well, unfortunately, just the reason the feature got deleted was there simply were tech limitations to PS3 and Xbox 360 that just didn't allow them to keep track of all the nemesis that you end up making while playing the game and everything.
Right. And we're not having that issue right now with games when it comes to both generations. Like, you mentioned Elden Ring, that is coming to both systems. Yakuza Like a Dragon, and the other thing that they do as well is they release the next generation games, and then a few weeks later announce the last gen ports. They get released and they're fine. Like, there's literally no difference. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, if people want to get pedantic about the differences, you might have reduced draw distance. You might have less objects in memory that might show up, but for the bulk of the consumers out there, they're probably not gonna care. I mean, the way that most consumers are gonna see it is, hey, does it run on my machine? Great, awesome.
Yeah, it doesn't look like crap. Awesome. Like, another one, Miles Morales. Miles Morales was one of the games that launched with the PS5 and got a ton of sales because it looked really good. They put it out on PS4 a month and a half later after it was released, and that was fine too. Like, we're not seeing a marked difference with these consoles. And I don't think it's the power of these consoles. I think that the companies have started realizing that, oh, we have this big consumer base for the PS4. Why are we getting rid of that? Why are we getting out of that at all? And that's where the business lies. My feeling is if by 2025, 2026, if we're still looking at ports coming to the PS4, either we're having a much longer generation, or this is going to be a wasted generation. This is going to be a generation where basically innovation was strangled by the business to the point where they essentially say, oh, we can't get more blood out of the stone. Okay, fine, let's just use the PS. We'll do the PS5 for now, but then the PS6 will come out in 2028, and then we'll do the same exact thing over and over again. Like, that's where I'm thinking might happen. And if that happens, oh my god, that will be terrible, because that's my fear with the games industry, is that the business side is going to creep up more and more and more into the creative side. And this is a big way of doing that.
I guess game industry malaise is most certainly a concern for me too, especially just when the game industry just seems to kind of be in sort of a similar rut like Disney, with Disney doing the live action remakes of some of their most beloved animations and stuff like that. We're seeing it in the games industry with just, hey, we're remaking, this game. We're doing this, and I don't have anything against remakes if they're good and there's a lot of love and heart into them. Great example would be the Resident Evil 2 remake. I thought it was really a fun way to kind of see Resident Evil 2 again in a completely different light. Final Fantasy VII remake, the first chapter of it. I think it's interesting because they were able to get into story beats that I remember seeing references to some of these story beats they couldn't get into in some of the Japanese Ultimania books and everything. So to see some of these stories that they couldn't do in the original PlayStation version being realized, that's cool. But for every good remake, there's still a handful of just bad or lazy remakes where it's just kind of, okay, well, we cleaned up the textures, that's it. So, hey, how about $60 for this? Or in some cases, even going as far as asking $70, and it's just kind of like, really? Just this is now what constitutes as like a remake, or a remaster? Just something that barely had any love and heart put into it, and then just here you go. Look at all these technologies we've leveraged on new consoles, and like the only technology that might be leveraged is ray tracing. So yeah, just I'm definitely with you that it just seems like ninth generation seems to be a gaming generation that could be potentially one that in the history books in the future might be seen as a wasted gaming generation. And I would hate for this kind of malaise to continue into 10th generation consoles if the 2028 timeline is to be believed, and if it proceeds to be on track. But yeah, just I would like to see things kind of push the boundaries a little more. I'd like to see a little bit more creativity in the industry that I love so much, but just ultimately there's just no telling on how the future may run.
When it comes to remakes, like, I don't mind remakes either. There are some games, like when it was rumored that Ninja Gaiden might get a remake, or they are gonna, I guess, reboot it or whatever. I was like, perfect game to do that with. Like, it's been so long, and we haven't seen it in over a decade. Perfect, good. That's a good one. When we're hearing that Horizon Zero Dawn will get a remake, is when I'm like, what? Like, why? That didn't need a remake. The Last of Us Part 1 didn't even need a remake. And of course, that sold. Good lord, people. Ugh. But, yeah, like, that's a definite fear I have, too, is that basically we're just going to get remakes, remasters, and reports of previous gen games, essentially. And we're going to get that ad nauseum every generation. And the more and more that these companies are allowed to do that, the more and more it's going to be like, if they keep getting sales like that, you're going to see that happen often enough. And Nintendo is guilty of this too. Like, Nintendo is definitely guilty of this. So I'm not going to give them a free pass. So
yeah, and even more egregious is just some of the stuff that they've done ends up being limited run only, like the Mario 3D collection. That was only on sale for a limited amount of time, which I thought was scummy because, of course, just stuff like Mario 64 has a huge part in just the legacy of Mario and everything, and to kind of gate that off with kind of like you can only buy this on the eShop and physical copies for a limited time, and then after that time has passed, we just pull the listing off. It's just kind of one of those things that left me scratching my head. And then another great example was Nintendo ended up doing I guess you can call it a slightly remastered port of the first Fire Emblem game that actually had an official English translation on it. And it was an eShop only thing, but it was only available, again, for a limited amount of time. And then after that time has passed, the download is just completely locked off forever. So if you ended up missing out your chance to buy this, there's no legal way to get the game and everything.
Yeah, and that is weird in itself, because I doubt it's going to cost them that much to actually keep that on there. But that sounds like the Disney method from the 90s when they do their VHS tapes of their animated movies. What they
the whole vault policy thing that Disney used to do.
Like, I can definitely see them turning around and, let's say, I don't know, let's say when Engage releases for Fire Emblem next month, you don't see them saying, oh, and for this week only, we're going to bring back the Fire Emblem port with the English translation back for 1 week only. Purchase it for now for $5 more, and then go from that point. I can see them doing that. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I guess back to the main part of the issue I have with it being 2028 is that next year better be a year where I see the new games coming out and going, oh yes, this is a marked improvement from the previous generation. Oh yeah, there is no way this could have been done that last generation without like big concessions. I better see it next year, because if it doesn't, we're looking at a wasted generation, in my opinion, at least. If you're going to tell me we're going to, and yes, people say, but what about COVID? What about, COVID really screwed things up? Sure. But then make the generation later, okay? Thank you for listening to this podcast segment. The Capital Games Podcast is done every week, and we post it on all your favorite podcast apps, as well as segments on YouTube. If you want to listen to another segment, you can listen to a new one right there on the screen. We also do a movie podcast called the Capital Games Movie Club. If you'd like, you can go ahead and click on that and see all the movies that we have reviewed from that point. Thank you for listening, and we hope to hear from you soon.